The British Columbia Aviation Museum's Avro Lancaster FM 104 arrived from Toronto, disassembled in September 2018 on 5 trailers. Today we're speaking with Ted Vaughan, who has a personal experience with Lancasters. Ted flew an entire tour in the Second World War on Lancasters. With 408 Squadron RCAF, Ted flew that entire tour. His second op was as second Dickie on the Nuremberg raid in 1944. So my first question to Ted is, what is a second Dickie?
Well, a second Dickie is a pilot. We had to fly, the pilots had to do 2 familiarization trips at the end of their training before they took their own crew on an operation. And so I just sat behind the pilot of another aircraft and on that trip. And that's what a second Dickie is. We had to do that twice. And my first trip as a second Dickie with that same crew, I did 2, was to Essen. And the next trip was in Nuremberg, which was a colossal, we shouldn't have been flying because we were into the moon period. It's been decided later on. But Bomber Harris decided that we should go to Nuremberg that night, and then we were into the moon period, and we shouldn't have been doing that. But anyway, we were. And the reason that there was so much trouble that night for everybody is because we didn't have the long-range navigation equipment. Like it was very good up to far as the industrial areas in the Ruhr and places like that. But further on, it didn't work very well, and we were victims. And our aircraft were all over the place, out of place. Some people did get to Nuremberg, but we ended up at Schweinfurt, and the bombing, the people that took us, that we were following, the Pathfinders, in other words, they dropped the flares over Schweinfurt and thinking it was Nuremberg. And we never did get to Nuremberg, our airplane, but at Schweinfurt or one of those places that starts with an S, I think it was Schweinfurt. But it's about 20 or 30 miles away from Nuremberg. And we were successful, and as we were going away, we saw all the flares go down and the searchlight start at Nuremberg, but we'd already finished our trip, and we came home safely. That was my second Dickie trip, the second one. The first was to Essen with that crew. Now, with that crew, the navigator of that crew was the crew. They're all awarded the DFC because they completed their operation before me. Sometime in June of '44. I didn't complete my operations till August of '44. But anyway, the navigator, he ended up here at the same Broadmead, and because he was from Calgary or something. But anyway, he passed on a couple of years ago, or a year ago anyway. Anyway, that's it about second Dickies.
Now tell us about the time that you came home on 3 engines.
Well, now that was my trip to Dusseldorf. After that, the shambles at Nuremberg, they stopped. Bomber Command started to concentrate on the industrial area in Dusseldorf and Karlsruhe and all those areas. And on the Dusseldorf trip, we were at 23,000 feet, and we got coned. That's what the English expression was, coned by searchlights. And we were caught in searchlights, but we were at 23,000 feet above the danger area from the anti-aircraft guns used to combine with the searchlights below 20,000 feet, and we could have got blown up, but we were above that danger area. So we were on the bombing run, and caught in searchlights. And all of a sudden, the mid-upper gunner says, "Oh, the starboard ender's on fire!" And he had to get out of his turret because the flames were coming back, and he couldn't. And it was too hot. And this is the mid-upper gunner up on top of the aircraft, and he had to get out of his turret because it was so hot from the flames. Now, so my English bombing flight engineer beside me very, very calmly said, "Oh, we'll just core that motor." In other words, stop it. That's the English expression, to stop the motor.
So tell us again. Oh, sorry.
We were on the bombing run,
Yeah.
and we were coned in searchlight, but we were at 23,000 feet, and we ran, and then the flames did go out while we were still on the bombing run, and we made a successful bombing run, and we hit the target according to the photograph that was taken, always photographed. And we then proceeded, I went into a corkscrew, as it was called, to get out of the searchlights, and I ended up at about 16,000 feet, and then the navigator says, "This is the course to go home," and we flew home on 3 engines. But the engine was never on fire. It was friendly fire from one of my friends up above me, and it was we dropped 30-pound incendiary bombs, and one of the incendiary bombs hit, but missed all of it, the fumes and the gas tanks, and burned right through. So by the time we got home, there was a big hole in the wing, and there was nothing wrong with the engine anyway, but we had no trouble flying that Lancaster on 3 engines. I used to fly Lancasters on 1 engine, but to show the people when I was an instructor after I completed my grade. Anyway, that doesn't matter. That's it.
So what did you do after completing your tour?
They let my rest of my crew go home, or my Englishman, he went to another area, and they used flying an airplane and navigating to India. But I had to stay there. They kept me there as an instructor, getting people from 2 engine to 4 engine. So I kept flying Lancasters as an instructor till 1945, until the Germans surrendered. But then they let me come home because I volunteered to go to India because we were still fighting the Japanese.
And you've got some special hardware here from France?
Yes.
From the French consulate?
Well, one of my trips was June the 6th, when an invasion was Juno Beach. It wasn't called Juno Beach then. The target was a village right on the coast. La Police or something like that, the name of it was. And then I got involved in the Folly Gap when we finally broke through the German lines, and the Germans started to really retreat.
Yeah.
The Folly Gap. And that's another successful operation I was on. My squadron was and railroad yards and lots of targets in France. And we were noted, our bombing our crew was noted as doing very accurate bombing. We had we were ranked highly when it came to dropping bombs and hitting the target.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us and for underscoring the importance of the Lancaster in the Second World War.
Oh, marvelous. Marvelous airplane, really, for what we were doing. And they had 4-engine Halifaxes too, a lot of the Canadians flew. But if you had to go into a corkscrew with a Halifax, you might get into a high-speed stall with a Halifax. But Lancaster, we never had any trouble with the Lancaster getting into high-speed stalls when you were doing a corkscrew or evasive action. But at Halifax, you had to be careful.
Well,
But that's another thing that I learned about.
And everyone can stay up to date on the progress of the restoration of Avro Lancaster FM 104 here at the BC Aviation Museum at YYJ.